after 9/11, in the weeks after 9/11, my friend John Perosi was actually, he was supposed to be on one of the planes. He was supposed to be on the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. But he had left the night earlier to get to Hawaii. He's a filmmaker, and he was shooting a commercial or something, but he'd flown to Hawaii. And he called me that morning at 9/11 and he said, I'm coming, and he wanted to know if I'd drive with him to New York, because his car was here. He had a house here and a place in the West Village. And so about a week after 9/11, or maybe, a few days after 9/11, it was my girlfriend's birthday on the 14th, and we had already planned to have people visiting from out of town and camp up in the park. And like you were talking about, there were no airplanes, which was so strange. It was so surreal. It was completely like we were on a planet, a silent planet up in the park. And then sometime right after that, there was the Graham Parsons Festival came through town, and I mean, it was planned already, and it was at the Saloon, and it was at the Crossroads and the Beatnik, and so there were, and I remember we were all kind of really relieved to see people. I don't know, just here in Joshua Tree, it was a relief to see that there were, it was the first time ever, really, because I'd lived here for several years at that point. And it was the first time where I really saw people kind of like us, people walking in the sidewalks. And everybody was just kind of like, it was the first time that people left LA, I think, after 9/11 to, to leave town and to go hear music. And it was really interesting. And so then John and I got in the car and drove to New York. And we both kind of went there thinking, like I went there thinking, oh, I want to go volunteer, I want to do something. And got there and was just so devastated that even weeks later, and we, like, the night we got there, we went to his apartment, and we were sitting there for like 5 minutes, and we were looking at each other. It was like 3 in the morning. We were like, I have no idea, but I'm not going to be able to sleep. And so we drove down to the perimeter, and we saw the policemen who were just wiped out, and they were on the, around the perimeter of the World Trade Center, and they were really sweet. They were so kind, and they were like telling us, well, you can sort of see from over here, you can't go any farther than this. And the thing that really struck me were, all of the missing posters everywhere. That was unbelievable. And just being there, even though it was weeks afterwards, a few weeks afterwards, and this smell that you were talking about. And I was staying up on 19th Street at my friend Lovey's, and it was like every once in a while, right when the sun was going down, it seemed like the wind would shift, and you'd get that scent, and it was just so horrible. And I was buying T-shirts, and Levy was like, we've got to go to Chinatown and buy some T-shirts, because nobody's going to Chinatown, because it's like so close. So we went down to Chinatown and bought a bunch of T-shirts to send to friends here. And we went to the post office by her place on 22nd, I think it was 21st or something like that, post office. And that day, and went up to the counter, and the woman at the counter was wearing a mask. And I was like, why are you wearing a mask? She said, and later on the news, it was the post office where they thought they'd found anthrax the first time that day. It was just so freaking surreal. The whole thing was just so otherworldly and horrifying. But I just want to say that there was kind of a moment there, Halloween, the big Halloween parade from Christopher Street, and, Greenwich Village, and people really were out that night, and really, of course, the costumes were brilliant because people spend all year working on their costumes. But there was just one really, Cipro was the drug that was the Cipro, made by our friends at the Bayer Corporation, who whole history that I'll share on another day about that. But Cipro was the drug that was the only antidote known for the anthrax, right? And of course, Bayer owned it, whatever. But so there was a show on Broadway, The Producers, that was the big popular show at the moment. Well, just to lighten it up for just a minute, there was someone dressed in among the costumes that I saw somebody that was wearing a snow globe, and she was Statue of Liberty in a snow globe, and as she walked, the snow would fall on her. It was so ingenious. It was really great. And then there was a man dressed as a doctor, and he had a sign that said, "We'll trade Cipro for tickets to The Producers." Anyway, that's my 9/11 story. Except, you know what else, Sherry? Interesting coincidence was that Fred Drake's beautiful CD, the Twice Shy album, also we had planned to have the record release party on 9/11 at the Saloon, and of course, we went anyway, and so all of the TVs, it was so sweet, because none of us had TVs, you know, being here in the desert. And so it was so surreal because all of the TVs around the bar were showing the buildings, and anyway, so another record that came out that same day was Bob Dylan's record, Love and Theft. Came out the same day. Yeah, and we'd gotten it like at the minute, you know, and the song can never hear it without thinking of that, but the song where he sings "Summer days and summer nights are gone."
Exactly.
Anyway.
You got the same
3 great records came out that year.
I was in New York City on 9/11, and my story pales by comparison to most people. But I was 2, 3, 4 degrees separated from people who lost someone. I did not directly lose anyone, but I had a friend missing for 24 hours, feared dead, and she escaped. She worked at the World Financial Center right next to the Twin Towers, and she witnessed the second plane flying into the building from where she was that day and had to flee. I was in Times Square and just had gotten to work, and I listened to the events unfold on AM 1010 Winds radio, which my boss was fond of listening to from his office in the morning. It was so horrific and so surreal that we really just couldn't grasp what was really going on. We actually wandered across the street to our largest client, Condé Nast, who I had worked for previously, and they were now my client, because we knew that they would have televisions going in their conference rooms. So we entered a skyscraper on 9/11 to find out what was going on 9/11. I mean, there's just a lot of irony, you know. There was no subways running when I left the building. Everyone just didn't know what to do, so people just started leaving and going to see if their homes were still there. Like, nobody could really grasp what was going on. I lived in the West Village, only about 1.5 miles from the Trade Center, so I really didn't know what I was going to find. And I just started walking, and it was what I would perceive as my version of Day of the Living Dead, because as I was walking down, I was meeting people covered with ash, disheveled, with a dead look in their eye, and coming towards me, and I was going down to see, you know, and it was just, I don't know, surreal is all I can say. And electronic stores were pulling televisions out into the street, and people were gathering in the street to watch footage of what was going on. When I got home, my apartment was intact, but I'd left the windows open, and the smell, to this day, I can still smell that awful smell, which lingered in the city for months, actually. And I made my way on one subway that was running that night uptown to stay with my boyfriend, because I just didn't want to be alone in my apartment. And it was like a vigil on the subway, and hearing people who were gathered around people who were telling their stories in the subway cars, workers who had been there with hard hats covered in ash. It was just, I really can't hardly share really what it was like. But my friends were okay, and I was okay, and I guess for me, I'm so grateful that I knew the New York City before, and I think to have known it before, during, and after is something quite remarkable, and I'm grateful for that, because it was a different world before and after. There was a definite defining moment there for all of us, but especially for people who were from the city. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Where I was on 9/11 was in Kansas City, Missouri, and I have an album called "I'm Forcing Goodness Upon You," and I had been finishing it up for a year in Kansas City in a studio, and it had been a 7-year project started in LA, and so I was obsessed with getting that in the mail, and I was expecting it in UPS. All of my 1,000 copies I had ordered of my new album, I was expecting it on 9/11, 2001. And so the morning of, all I was thinking about, a little overly focused or whatever, my boyfriend Stuart calls from work and says, "Sure, turn on the TV." So I turned it on. Planes flying into, oh my God, what's happening? So it just like put a whole new perspective on things. And my CD arrived the next day on 9/12/2001.
Wow.
And I had a CD release party planned at McCabe's like a week later, and I think planes were still not flying. Whenever we had it, we couldn't fly. So Stuart and I got in the car and we drove for 24 hours straight, switching, driving, sleeping, and we had our little CD release party at McCabe's in Santa Monica. And so that's what was going on with me. And I was the first concert when McCabe's reopened because they were closed. And there, Jeff Davis at the time was the manager, and he said, "Well, can't think of a better person to open with but Sherry, and I'm Forcing Goodness Upon You," my album. So, anyways, that's where I was. Thanks.